Hi, everybody. My name is Zara, and I am the CEO of In the Loop and your host of Scaling Secondhand Podcast, where we're getting into all things mission, madness, and methods behind at scale secondhand businesses. Today, we have Chris Homewood. He is the CEO of one of America's largest for profit thrift chains, fittingly named America's Thrift Stores. Chris, thank you for coming and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Zara. I'm thrilled to be here. Such a good time to be in our space.
Amazing. Okay, and starting with the first question, we're asking everybody, what is the craziest thing you've ever found in your thrift store back rooms?
Yeah, it's that's a loaded question. There's a lot of things. Generally like the amazing brands. So just sort of on a in a big bucket, the brands that we see, like really high-end brands that people give away, that's been kind of fun. But there's one in particular, I've become a little bit of an audiophile. Like I like records, sort of analog records, and there was a probably 4 foot tall crank big horn old school record player
Whoa.
that was in pristine condition, that I thought was super cool. Obviously, stayed on the floor for someone else to buy.
Hmm.
But yeah, you just have no idea. The inventory flow is so chaotic and so amazing. So yeah, there's been a couple of really interesting things.
Amazing. I've asked this a few times now, and all of the answers have been positive, which is great because I'm also eager to hear some of the, you know, nasty stuff, which is where my mind went. But I'm hopeful and thankful that everyone's had like one of those grailed, amazing, unique finds. Uh,
Yeah, there's certainly some of that, but we'll focus on the good
yeah.
stuff.
Um, Amazing. So I know you stepped into this role as CEO in 2025, and your predecessor doubled revenue in 12 years from 50 million to over 105. That's certainly aggressive growth. I'm super curious to hear what your expansion playbook looks like going forward.
Yeah, thanks for asking. I mean, I did show up. It's been about a year now, which has been really fun. Really, where we've looked at the value creation is getting focused on what we call the main effort. So, growing 5 stores a year, that keeps us at that plus 10% unit over unit growth, which is a kind of a cool scale number, almost like a retail norm. I mean, we're trending, we'll probably do that amount. So if you think about 50 million over 50 million over 12 years, we're going to do that in about two. So we'll grow by another 50 million plus or minus between new stores and comp stores over the next 2 years, 2 to 3 years, call it, and then keep on this trend. So we anticipate being a, $250 million company here within the next 3 to 5 years, which is really exciting. There's so much opportunity. I love sort of how we're positioning. We tend to operate in smaller markets, so we can be profitable. We can help our communities. We can, make a good imprint in our communities and with our teams. But we don't have to be in Chicago, LA, Denver, or Dallas, right? We can operate in some of these smaller cities, and there's a lot more of those than there are the big ones. So we're super excited about that growth platform. But yeah, we're gonna go big. We're gonna go big.
That's awesome. Yeah, I was super interested in your Southeast roots as a
Mhm.
company. You alluded to it a little bit, but can you elaborate on what makes that region super interesting and uniquely suited for the growth of thrift?
Yeah, some of this is, you got to find the white space and find your differentiation and what's your moat and things like that as you think about scaling an organization. So, the Southeast is where we started, but we're not limited to that, which is super exciting. As a quick example, if you look at north of us, if you go north into Kentucky and even into the Midwest, there's about 100 cities just in that small geography, sort of excluding the Eastern Seaboard even, that are within our footprint,
Mm.
that we know that we can operate, that we can create value, that we can, partner with great charities and things like that. So the customer base is really interesting, really fun. So you talked about growing cities. Obviously, there's a movement to a lot of those middle America cities currently. We also have, that in those cities are people that are always looking for a bargain, right? Like everybody wants value. But you also think about, and you know this too, like the space that's growing in thrift the fastest is this millennial, Gen Z, Gen Alpha group, which is really interesting. So it's just about 50% of our total population right now is in that cadre. of shopper and in that age group. So, college towns, the
Yep.
Southeast, I think big
Yeah.
football cities all throughout, this part of the country, but even then as we expand too. So I just am so excited and think that there's a lot of opportunity to be an advocate in those communities, continue the sustainability of keeping that inventory out of landfills and finding a new home. So there's just so many different lanes that we can play in. And as we've looked at the model and really gotten ambitious about the model, but also really rigorous about how do we make sure that we create value, those opportunities in all of America, I think there's just so many of them.
Yeah. Yeah, certainly. That makes a lot of sense. Where is your biggest store in the 5 states you're in right now?
Yeah, the biggest store, let's see, it's usually tied Athens, Georgia. Is and Maria runs that store. I was in that store last week. Just amazing, great team, great population. They can go through a lot of pounds. They can go
I
through a lot
bet.
of pounds, and it's usually 1-2 with Alabaster, which is just south of Birmingham.
Okay.
So they're usually neck and neck.
And how do you think the merchandising strategy changes in cities like Athens, where there's, a majority college kids, and also donation flow?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because the merchandising, we operate on 100-pound units, so we don't source individual items so much as we source large bulk or we measure sort of our progress that way as it relates to merchandising. So we're going to push 75 million pounds worth of inventory through the system, this year. So when you think about those college towns, there's not a specific strategy so much as it is, the whatever the environment around the store, it usually reinforces that sort of clientele, right? So you give and you get. But I think as you look at what goes, what sells inside those different departments, it really is fairly broad because you've got everything from sororities and fraternities, you've got everything from students to parents. So it really is just about creating a fresh look. That to me, what I've learned over the last year in this business is really it's about that freshness, right? What all of our customers want, whether it's a college student or a mom or a dad or whomever, they want to see new stuff all the time, and that's the hook, right? Like that's the secret sauce of getting this business running.
Yeah. And that is a great segue into the fact that you didn't come from thrift, which is so interesting and amazing to get the insights from an industry, off-price retail specifically, that I have really reflected on how analogous it is to thrift in many ways. And I'm sure you've spent much of the last year, reflecting on the similarities and differences. High level, how are things different in a surprising way, and how are things similar in a surprising way?
Yeah, I feel really fortunate. I worked at Target for a long time, a discount retailer that had really good systems, really mature systems, and really great talent development. And then at Ross, I was in the field as a field leader, but then was in store operations as well. So I was fortunate because I got to see sort of the output and actually creating some of the systems and tools and processes that we use. So thrift is very, very, very similar to off price. And what we've talked a lot about is moving our mentality more towards normalizing thrift, right? Because if we make it so special and so difficult and so unique, it's hard to get people to figure it out. It's hard to get investors to buy in. It's hard to really translate that into a growth strategy, right? As you're thinking about scale, because scale is about simplicity. So if we simplify the model, so things as it relates to off price, it's a diverse inventory mix. We don't have planograms. We do things a lot by flow and adjacencies. The inventory changes every day. There's that treasure hunt mentality. So a lot of that is really similar. And I think what I've been able to see gratefully that has been similar is really good routines, really good routines, really good systems in stores because the foundations are very, very similar. Retail's retail. We're a brick and mortar retailer. So I think there's a bulk of what we do that is very similar. Obviously, really in the processing side of the business, that acquisition of products. If you think about retail is really three things. It's buy, move, sell. That's it. So the move and sell part is very similar to off price, but it's the buy or acquire side that's super different. So obviously off price, you go source different inventory levels. You're in the secondary market or there is a lot of direct sourcing. But in thrift, the universe kind of gives you what it gives you. And we talk about the inventory flow as chaotic, not that the process is chaotic, but it's chaotic in the sense that who knows?
Hmm.
You really have to kind of make the best of it and create value and find value in that. So I've had a ton to learn. And it's so fascinating to me because the model is very resilient as it because the elasticity of the product, right? But it's very temperamental.
Mm.
If you don't, if you're messing with the processing flow, if you don't follow the process correctly, or grading how we move inventory to the floor, how much inventory moves to the floor, how you adjust the floor based on how inventory is selling, what customers are finding, what time of the year it is. It's very, very sensitive. But again, if you find those, once you correct those sensitivity points, you're back off to the races and she finds what she needs. So
Yeah.
I feel really lucky that I got to have that experience at Ross because great mature companies relates to sort of that model. And I've been able to lean on that a little bit and then really spend time learning like, okay, how do you do this thrift thing? Which has been really fun.
Yeah. And I guess along that point, do you see room? So under TJX, obviously their own, Ross, TJ Maxx, can't recall what the outdoor brand is, and then Home Goods, that kind of
Hmm.
diversification of product and customer base, but the similar distribution. Do you see a similar opportunity in the thrift space?
That's a really great question. I would say that we're not focused on that today. I think some of that is driven by the smaller or mid population cities that we're in, because there's just a finite amount of inventory right in that space, and even if we're pumping it in, I think what I appreciate about TJ's, and even a little bit differently than Ross, they've curated a different shopping experience with each one of those brands. And I think that there's clearly value there. Those home categories are cranking. Um, Sportsman's Warehouse, I think, is the other one. I think that's what it is. Anyway, the other brand, what we're leaning in on as far as like getting really rigorous about our model and what's our value proposition is that sort of one-stop shop. So you can get a little bit of miscellaneous, you can get an outfit, you can sort of curate your own thing, you can pick up toys. So we're creating more of that customer traffic because we're not at a place today where we think that we're big enough or we're getting enough of that inventory that we want to split it out just yet. So
Yeah.
it's really staying myopic on that one-stop shop experience.
Yeah, that makes sense. I know a lot of thrift operations are starting new goods programs. Ironic
Hmm.
that it's like new to thrift, which typically means off price or returns or
Yeah.
one of those
Yeah.
streams. Is that something you guys are exploring?
Yeah, it's about 5 to 8% of our inventory is new. So this is like socks, belts, underwear. We do augment for Halloween. We have some new inventory that we layer in over the thrift. So think you've got, all your apparel for costumes, and then there's like the vampire teeth or a makeup kit or a wand or a sword or something, right, to sort of supplement that for that holiday. But we really want to try to stay disciplined and focused on what is the value for the customer and what is the value within the organization. Obviously, anytime that you start to peel that away, especially as you're scaling, you start, if you get differentiation, not in a good way, but if you start to experiment with getting too diverse with the model as you scale, that gets bigger faster.
Yeah.
So we are being very intentional about keeping the model tight and simple as we scale, because where real value is going to come from is in those units and in making sure that we have a consistent shopping process, a consistent talent management process, for those different markets that we're going into. So yeah, we have small augmentation, but we like thrift.
Yeah.
It's a lot of, I mean, it's really where we can create the most value, like I said, in the communities and for customers too.
Yeah, it's a operationally much higher barrier to entry in
It
terms of
is
starting and scaling versus
very
buying
much so.
in new goods. I'm sure that feels like, oh, that
Yeah.
was a piece of cake to source now.
Right. Right.
Um,
Yeah. Not quite. Yeah.
so in terms of ATS really is focusing on, as you said, being a one-stop shop for
Mhm.
customers. What are some other points of differentiation when comparing your customer shopping experience at big box discount retailers?
Yeah. I think it's less competition, some comparison, but it's a lot more collaboration. One of the things that as we go into these new markets that we're hearing from other big box retailers is our customers will shop our stores on average 14 times a year. So that's more than once a month. That's really good. So if you think about a thrift customer, goes in to find what might be there today, right? Which is different than someone who goes to a Ross or to a TJ's or to a Five Below or one of our partners. If you think about that in a shopping mall, because it's a different shopping experience. You're looking for something specific, whereas with the thrift experience, you're looking because you've got an idea in your head or you're looking to curate something that's uniquely yours. So, what we've found as we've gone into some of these centers is that it's very complementary. And we found a really sort of warm handshake with a lot of those other retailers because it comes down to traffic, right? If they're in the parking lot and your next door neighbor has people that are coming again and again and again and again, that increases your potential foot traffic as well. So it really comes down to sort of the law of numbers and math as it relates to the shopping experience.
Yeah, 100%. I think
Yeah.
something that's also probably interesting for you as you came into this role is, I guess, the tariffs hit in like early 2025. So
Yeah.
as you transition from, purchasing goods, you're like, you saw that one
Yeah.
coming from a
Woo,
mile
dodge that
away.
bullet. Yep.
Thrift was very protected from that shift, and honestly, it highlighted the resiliency of the sector in the span of global geopolitical events. So really dodged a
Yeah.
bullet there.
I know. I know. I've had enough of those sort of world events or 100-year events in my career, so I'm all right to let this one go by on the outside. I'm okay.
um, on the recruitment and training side,
Yeah.
does that differ in terms of your experience again at discount retail versus thrift?
Yeah, it's a really great question. So what we've tried to do with the model is look at what is uniquely thrift and how do we accelerate the training there. So one of the things I've been thrilled with coming to our company, we have really good data. We have a lot of really good data. So we've been creating simply dashboards, right? So if I'm a new person coming into the processing, which is the most complex industry level sort of knowledge, institutional knowledge aspect of the stores, creating dashboards that makes that learning curve a little bit flatter, right? So it's not so steep and it doesn't take so long. So we're using sort of the data warehouse that we have to find those points where we can acquire talent and help our talent get up and running faster. We're starting with processing, retail, distribution, supply chain. So we're kind of working it across the enterprise. I would tell you though that retail's retail, and I have three things that we're sort of, and these is the world according to Chris, not so much ATS, but desire to lead, desire to learn, desire to listen. And so if you find people that are looking for opportunities to lead, they want to be in charge or they want to be in front or they want to go challenge the norm or really go deliver something, create something, like that's good no matter what. A desire to learn. So being curious, always thinking about the business, thinking about the customer, thinking about the community, like that sort of a mindset. Like, how do I learn about the business? They tend to be more curious, ask really good questions. And then the desire to lead, or excuse me, desire to listen, which is the last one. That sort of a competency base will really sort of matriculate into people that want to understand our business. They want to learn from the people that have been doing it. They want to learn from the communities. Again, they want to learn how to do this business, and it makes them hungry. Again, it makes them curious. So yeah, I am really agnostic when it comes to talent, and part of what I've really wanted to do with our organization is sort of demystify it. Because if we're sort of so unique and so scary, like that's really cool. And that could be fun too. But we can't scale
Yeah.
because, if you think about the amount of people on the planet and then the amount of people that do retail, the amount of people that do discount retail, and then the amount of people that do thrift, like there's only like seven,
Mhm.
right? We can't scale with seven people.
Mhm.
So it's been really engaging to tap into the base of the people that have been doing this for a really long time, and they're so good at it, and really harbor and help them or use them, I think, to help us understand like what would it take to make this better. And so it's been a really interesting way to sort of engage the existing team, but then build out something for the new folks that are coming in because we got to, we're moving.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And that core thesis of you can scale more easily when you simplify things. Uh,
Yep.
I like that. I think that's
Yep.
a very astute approach. So speaking of scaling,
Yeah.
you have pretty aggressive growth goals. You're crushing them. What is the thing that breaks first when you scale? Is it sourcing, ops, culture, hiring, real estate?
Yeah. This is always a really interesting one because a lot of folks think about the operations or the tactics, right? So for me, where it starts is with culture. If you're going to export the secret sauce of an organization, which really is how that organization lives and breathes and communicates and operates. I mean, we've got 2,100 people. So, all those 2,100 different touch points. If you're a smaller organization, especially, you go from a founders led organization where a personality can do it, right? If it's one person with 5 stores, there's enough of my personality or a founder's personality to get to all 5 of those locations and keep that sort of mentality really tight. But there's this transition from founders led to professionally managed where you have to find that next secret sauce of how do you hire, how do you engage, how do you translate that outside of a single human being. So, we go through the exercise of who are the very best people in the company, how would we describe them, and so we land on the values that are existing in the organization today. This isn't like the glossy posters of people rowing, or weird things that hang in offices, right? This is a very tactical, a very operational discipline related to who is it, because once we get the who right, then there's less risk in the what. So operations can scale and we'll have people that help us solve that problem. The real estate, right? That's a bit of a leader, right? Because we got to find those. But again, if we have the right people understanding what the mission of the organization is and how we want to operate and communicate, that sort of translates through the organization. So I think that you can skip that, in my opinion, you can skip that step, but eventually it's going to come around and bite you because you're going to start to see, again, when you think about that sort of growth path, right? The problem, this delta between where you are and where you're going, gets a lot bigger. And so those problems or those variances, not necessarily a problem, those variances get real big. And having a group of people that think similarly, right, that know what their value is, they understand what the mission is, that helps us sort of manage what that looks like. Get them on board, and then the rest of this just becomes, the problems that we go solve together. So I'm a huge culture guy as it relates to that.
Yeah, I love that. Is that from EOS, the employee operating system?
Oh, I'm familiar with
I have
that.
traction for
I haven't read it, but there might be something in there related to that. This all comes from my early. I started my career as a Marine Corps officer, and so one of the roles I had was boot camp. So the drill instructors worked for me, and we would take 800 young men at the. I was on the West Coast. It was only men at the time, and you'd take these 800 young men from all over the country and you'd have to form them into something that was cohesive and create an ethos, right, of what they believed in. And so I watched that. I was part of that. And ever since then, I'm like, how do you do this? Like, I want to recreate that because it's so powerful. It really is so powerful to get people adhering to and aspiring to something bigger than themselves. And you just see how powerful that culture is. And so I've tried to replicate that everywhere that I've gone because I had the good fortune of learning it sort of early on from a pretty big marketing machine. The Marine Corps is a pretty good marketing machine.
Yeah, I would say
Yeah,
so.
pretty good.
That's
Yeah.
an amazing career. Super inspiring, Chris. Thank you so much for being on the podcast and sharing your journey and ATS's growth with us. Is there anything that you'd like to plug or share with the audience?
Nothing specific except really thank you for leading the charge on this. We are in such a really cool space. Encouraging people to donate, encouraging people to, give their stuff a second life, I think is good for all of us. We talk about the fact that I'm not solving the world's problems, but I think we're making it a little less worse. Like we're trying to do our part. And I would just encourage people to do that. But just thank you for leaning in and for being part of this incredible journey at this incredible time. Really appreciate you.